Welcome to Vitality Maximize. Today I have with me Lauren, one of my close friends and someone I talk to almost all the time, who has a story to tell since she got her gene testing in 2016. Before we begin, please make sure to like and subscribe and turn on that bell notification on YouTube and on Odyssey. Lauren, how are you today?
Am well. How are you, Mfon?
Well, a little bit better than before. Definitely a little bit better than before. Um,
That makes me
I
very
know.
curious, but I'll leave it.
So, today so I was having a chat with Lauren, and I was like, you know, she or before she's now been in a more settled state. She did share lots of interesting things with me that I would like to share today. So to start off, Lauren, is it possible to just share an overview of all your health challenges and what's led you to take the initiative to that you may find answers through gene testing?
Yeah, so I would say that I've never had anything that would be considered extremely major, but always there was always an underlying insufficiency of health. So even as a baby, I had colic, and then I had thrush, and then as a little kid, was taking a lot of antibiotics because I was always catching flus and pink eye and an ear infection and this and that. So by the time I hit puberty, I was already noticing that I just wasn't as vital as the other kids. I had a really rough puberty, a lot of hormonal issues, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks really quite early. And even as a teenager, I remember coming home from high school and just crashing and taking naps as soon as I would get home. So I was already struggling with energy, already finding it hard to stay asleep. My other friends would be able to sleep in, whereas by 7 a.m. I would be wired, but then I was also tired. So but there was nothing that any doctor could tell me was wrong with me. Had all the tests come back normal, and I was still doing well in school, playing music. I've always been a musician, so I was always involved in that. Still very athletic. I rode my bicycle everywhere and played sports and started dancing when I found, house and hip hop dancing, and just was always really active. But I just, then in my 20s, I started to tune into the fact that my digestion didn't feel good a lot of the time. And I started to focus on that as like my digestive system is a problem and it makes me uncomfortable. So, in focusing on that, I discovered naturopathy, alternative ways of looking at health because I wasn't getting anywhere with Western doctors. It never clicked to me that there was a connection with my energy that was, pervasively compromised throughout. So I really just focused on the digestion. And then in my 30s, after in my early 30s, around 31, I went through a really upsetting breakup. My friend circle really was affected by that. So it was extremely stressful for me, being a very social person. And I had been focusing on my digestion to the point that I was now basically a raw vegan, practically a fruitarian, and put those things together. And it was a bit of a disaster. So I had basically my first big crash in terms of my energy and my digestion just really hitting the ground. And that's when I started. So that was about 2013. And that's when I started looking for answers. And that led me to spend a lot of money and do a lot of different tests, such as the 23andMe genetic testing that we're going to talk about today. I didn't continue to work with that doctor because, like so many other doctors, their was a element of victim blaming when he was convinced that I had pyroluria, I'm pretty sure, and when the test came back negative for that, I can't remember exactly how it was phrased or what exactly happened, but he basically accused me of, you know, making up symptoms, as, many of us have experienced when we have these persistent issues. So I didn't continue working with him to explore what he wanted me to try. But I did keep those results and look into them to try to uncover more answers myself. And now, knowing what I know, 8 years later, about mineral balancing, and having been doing mineral balancing for the last 4 years, I have a different perspective and understanding of what those results mean, and how I, keep that in mind for myself.
Yeah, that's quite a story. So very a number of minor problems leading to a massive one, and it's not easy to in your 30s having to have your friend circle just vanish like that and kind of like have to start your social life again as a result. Now, you did get a 23andMe in 2016, and yes, that is 8 years ago. That doesn't mean that there's not anything that we can glean from it. However, before we start going into it, I wanted to maybe ask a question that I think, you have a bit of personal experience with and maybe have views on this. But because as you've grown and evolved, you started to focus a lot into, the health of your liver. How have or you, at least for you and maybe for your audience, my audience, right? What can we learn about the liver, and especially when we're trying to process supplements, foods, and your symptoms and everything in between?
Well, my liver is a diva. My liver knows what she likes and what she doesn't like, and there's no compromising with that, really. So it's that has been my biggest hurdle, is to appease my liver enough to be able to tolerate supplements and even some foods. So I'm, that's still a piece that I'm uncovering, that I'm peeling away at the layers of. And I'm really happy to say that in the last year, I've made pretty amazing progress with it. I'm able to tolerate, like, I do mineral balancing, so limcomin is a big one for me because I've had, that chronically low sodium to potassium ratio, and there was a while there where I wasn't tolerating any limcomin. And I very obviously have copper issues, so I definitely need that zinc. So not tolerating limcomin was a big issue. John Bumpus actually said something, shout out to John, that really flipped a switch for me, which was that a lot of the times the liver will not be able to process herbs and supplements that help the liver if the nutrients aren't there in the first place. So there was a lot of time where, even dandelion tea would backfire on me and make my liver feel worse. Or artichokes would make my liver feel worse. Anything that was, cumin, anything that promoted bile flow would just lock me up and basically give me like a gallbladder attack. And I could tell that it actually would lessen my bile output. Whereas in the last year, thank goodness, where I've been steadily on 3 limcomins, 1 megapan, and a bit of molybdenum. I know. Party. Amazingly, I've consistently benefited from dandelion, artichoke, and a couple little other remedies to support bile flow. So that has been huge. Yeah, so I don't know what else to add to that, but
That's
for me personally, that really clicked a switch that, you know, I needed that zinc in place. I needed that bioavailable copper. I needed those B vitamins to be there, even in the smallest amount, to support the detox to happen.
yes. That is first and foremost for anybody who just have trouble tolerating supplements. You know, snail pace and a little bit of patience goes a very long way. And we're just gonna dive right into the gene testing. For the sake of today's podcast, we're just going to go over much of the methylation, gene enzymes, and we might go into some of the ones where there was a homozygous mutation, such as the vitamin D receptor and there was also, if I'm not wrong, there was the monoamine oxidase a little bit. So now,
Definitely homozygous for MTHFR.
yeah, and that's the very first one we're going to ram into right now. So, for those who do not have an idea of what MTHFR is, it is basically the enzyme that converts, basically, it's called 5,10 methylene tetrahydrofolate to 5-methylene tetrahydrofolate. This helps convert or one of two reactions that help convert homocysteine to methionine, so it can create enough S-adenosyl methionine. And now, how has that MTHFR mutation affected your ability to like process foods, maybe rich in folate and maybe other methyl groups, as well as supplements? And how's that evolved over the years?
Yeah, I had one person who looked at my 23andMe, put me on methyl folate and methylcobalamin. And I think actually that with MTHFR, you're supposed to be taking methyl forms. Mm-mm. So it's just like, what's the point? If that's what you're supposed to take, I don't, to this day, actually, I have to watch how much methyl groups, methyl donors I consume. Like beetroot powder, for example, that's touch and go. Like I can feel that in my liver like right away. The fact that I can take Megapan that has the methylfolate and the methylcobalamin, that's fantastic. I think I inadvertently found a little hack. I take it with a little bite of molybdenum, and I'm not sure if that affects it, but ever since I've been doing that, I've tolerated the Megapan. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a sulfur component to MTHFR as well.
To a certain degree, yes, because with molybdenum, it does help with the transsulfuration pathway, which
Right,
may convert like sulfite to sulfate, and that sulfate can be used to make taurine, glutathione, cysteine, etc. So,
right.
um, so basically, what you might be doing there is that you could be assisting other pathways that could help make more cysteine, methionine, and yeah, got big up molybdenum here. So it does.
And just a bit. Like I have the Mozyme Forte by Biotics Research, and I just take off a tiny little bit at the same time as I'm having my Megapan. And that really seems to, the two work really well together for me. So yeah, in terms of MTHFR specifically and methyl groups, I do not do well with methyl groups. So TMG is, part of a standard mineral balancing program. And so far, I have not been able to add that one. It just seems to jam up the flow of what's going for me. So yeah, where does that leave us? Because if the advice for people with MTHFR is to take more methyl groups, and for me, methyl groups are not helpful, what's that's not, cohesive information.
Yeah, it can be a bit of like a jungle with knowing what works well, what doesn't work well. Maybe it's not whether it might work well or not. It's just that at the same time, you do want to be a little bit, as you're going through healing, you still want to be a little bit functional, just to like, so in order to go do a little, be a little more functional, you're gonna have to like, you gotta have to be a little bit more slower, measured, and almost sort of like, the word isn't experimental, just, yeah, you have to create your own set point to a certain degree. So, well, yeah, it is interesting. Viewers, what do you think? Like, is MTHFR just a mutation, just add more just have more methyl folate or have more methyl B12 or anything along those lines? Now, speaking of TMG, or it's called betaline in other words, there's another gene mutation. It's called BHMT, and it stands for those who don't know what that means, is betaline homocysteine methyltransferase. This is basically, I think, one of the reasons why, at least in the mineral balancing world, that TMG is recommended is because it's basically a quick shortcut to make how do I say this, to make methionine from homocysteine, and that will speed up or at least enhance the methylation process, rather than to rely on two reactions, that is from methionine synthase and MTHFR to make same, they like to call it, and TMG can be a big one for people to tolerate. So could you just please expand a little bit of like, what have been your experience with TMG? Why could it be that maybe it corroborates the fact that you might have you now have a heterozygous mutation of, just taking a little bit of TMG. So just please expand that for us, please.
So it's very possible that it's pushing on a pathway that is just struggling, right? Because what I've noticed when I take it is I actually tend to tolerate it for about 2 days. And my main symptom of not tolerating something, tolerating supplements, is that I will notice my bile flow really shuts down. And so for about 2 days, I will notice an increase in bile flow, and then it just kind of closes the gates. So what I'm guessing, there's nothing wrong with TMG. It's absolutely a powerful, great substance for detoxification, but there's clearly something compromised in my ability to use it. And from what I understand through mineral balancing is that as we peel back the layers of interference, we become more able to use these channels that might be compromised.
Okay.
So it's something that I intend to keep trying, even just with little things like beets, right? Just starting slow with beets and beet powder, beet juice, right? And I do notice that I can tolerate even that a little bit better now. So yeah, I hope that answers.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I know that, for instance, that it's very interesting how your biofilm kind of just like shuts down. It's like shuts down, in your words,
I am
from
telling you, she
TMG.
is a diva in there.
It's very interesting because I was just thinking, what could be some of the dynamics there with that bioflow shutting down? But maybe that's a discussion for another day, maybe a personal discussion, who knows. Now,
We have to talk about
let
those
us just
things.
go very quickly, or not very quickly, because we want to get some more juice on this. We're going to talk about now the vitamin D receptor, and we do know that with the vitamin D receptor, it helps us, candidiol to calcitriol, and people, I'm sure you guys know a little bit of the benefits of vitamin D, immune, calcium metabolism, name it, right? But on your gene report, Lauren, about in 2016, did say that there was a mutation of a vitamin D receptor. It was called BSM, and just expand how this has played out in like maybe symptoms, behavior, life, anything? Humorous. Thanks.
Well, starting in 2015, I remember specifically my friend giving me a bottle of vitamin D, and I had been able to take this vitamin D as a supplement my whole life with no issue. Starting in 2015, I stopped being able to tolerate it. Same thing, my liver just would shut down. My liver would just get real unhappy, and the bile would stop. And that was the end of me taking vitamin D supplements. I've had people try to give it to me many times, even, muscle test me for it. You need vitamin D. And it's like, well, I can't. So it became very obvious that there was something going on with the vitamin D receptor.
I see. Then let me throw this question. How much vitamin D were you taking? Which brand were you taking? Because sometimes it could just be.
Nope.
Did you?
Nope. I have tried many different brands and different doses. I stopped even being able to tolerate milk with added vitamin D.
I see.
This was I can remember though, it was the natural factors. It was natural factors like gel caps, that specific one. But I've taken drops, I've tried powder, milk. Nope. I can do the sun. I can do a lot of sun. I love the sun. So that's what I do. I can do sardines and I can handle the amount that's in one little mega pan a day. But, I actually can't even do paramin.
You still can't do those bad boys.
No paramin. And I think it's the vitamin D and boron, to be honest. That's a whole other thing. But I can do calcium. I can do calcium on its own, and I can do some magnesium on its own. So it's been real fun. It's been real fun, guys.
I don't blame you at all. You have to sort of recalibrate from, just have to sort of recalibrate. Now, let me just press on a little bit on the vitamin D and some of the issues, sort of like taking in vitamin D. Did you say that you had a little, or when you were talking to me beforehand, did you say there was something that had to do with EBV and infections
H. pylori.
and everything in between? Because you've had had a life, let's put it that way, a lifespan of lots of chronic infections of different kinds. So
Yeah, so I've never tested positive for EBV Epstein-Barr, but a lot of what I deal with seems to line up with that. So, I've never done a blood panel for it or anything, but I've definitely noticed that antivirals make me feel a lot better. And I have tested through the GI map. I've seen H. pylori come up, and both of those apparently interfere with the VDR receptor.
okay.
Apparently, actually, one of the first things that Epstein-Barr does to make itself at home is to shut down your ability to process vitamin D and I believe vitamin A. So just another way to look at it, that it's not, necessarily a genetic issue. You might have a weakness in a certain area, but when your terrain drops in vitality to a certain level that these pathogens can stake their claim, that's when things actually start to go wrong.
Let's use.
Right, because I had no problem taking vitamin D or drinking fortified milk before my crash. I had no problem with it
Okay,
at all.
so now maybe I might have to throw that in there, but we had a crash in 2013, if I'm not wrong, and things just sort of like took a deep down south. And what do you think? How did that, or what were the set of symptoms or experiences that happened to you then, and how did it affect your ability to utilize certain nutrients, or how has that had to how did this shift your perspective in any way? What did you have to do much differently? Obviously, before mineral balancing and the last 4 years.
Yeah, so a few things that I noticed right away that I could no longer tolerate were bone broth, probiotics, and milk thistle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten those 3 back. I still haven't gotten those 3 back.
Okay, so those are quite the 3 to not tolerate, and a lot of people have a lot of what you may call an attachment to those 3 in particular. They're little lovelies, aren't they? Now, there was something I wanted to think. Okay, because I was thinking about the VDL receptor, right? And I was like, we know that vitamin D does help people call it the immune system, and the immune response is a better term for it. And I was just thinking, because with the immune response, there's like the thymus gland, the lymph nodes, and also our bone as well, with B cells and everything. I was just having a thought about this, and I wanted to ask you this. Could it just be that, and maybe everything might tie up with this question I may ask, right? The immune response is the thymus, right? I was just thinking that is like how do I say this? Wait, let me just go back with my trail of thought. Oh yes, I
No
wanted to
problem.
say
I'm going to
this.
adjust
Okay, I wanted to
something.
say this because you did mention earlier that with mineral balancing, right, that you've had a chronic low sodium potassium ratio, and we do know that with a low sodium potassium ratio, for those who don't know what that is, it's basically vitality ratio, immune response, like your cell battery, right? And what I wanted to throw out there is that with the low NAK ratio, you do have a more, let's say, it's less than ideal immune response. And in morphology, like if we were to look at the size of, say, your thymus gland or your lymph nodes, right, they actually shrink in response to a low NAK ratio. So, so I just wanted to throw this out there. Do you think that because maybe you could have been born with a somewhat lesser than ideal functioning thymus gland, lymph node, and everything, that it could impair your ability to maybe even handle a bit of vitamin D, and for a while a little bit of copper, because copper does play a little bit of a role with the functioning of the thymus glands. Yeah, took me a while.
I have no idea. No one's ever told me anything about the size of my glands, so I can't comment on that. I don't know if doctors ever think about that kind of thing or talk about that. So no one has ever brought that up to me. Just to put another little element in there is my family situation since I was born has been pretty intensely stressful. That, as we know, is a huge contributing factor to depleting minerals. Like, there's just been stress since I was a fetus. Basically, I've had prenatal stress the whole time. So I don't think that there's necessarily anything physically wrong with my anatomy, because both my parents, they are still going strong. Like, I live like a monk-ass nun. I don't know. I live very pure and clean and nerdy to maintain myself, in my middle age, whereas, they're boomers and they're still going hard. So I think that if anything, like, physiologically, I'm actually lucky to have like quite good background. But like, my hypothesis is, I'm at the end of, many generations of smokers, generations of people growing up in factory towns. I was raised in a big city with a lot of car pollution. And so I'm guessing that since my parents and the rest of my family hasn't had issues with like their glands, I'm thinking that it's more like stress, pollution, the toxins. I'm the firstborn, and actually, Mafon, I don't know if you've noticed this. Tell me if you've noticed this, and other practitioners watching. I have noticed that it seems to be that the firstborn
Mm-hmm.
seems to often struggle the most. And so I have two hypotheses on this. One is that it's the congenital toxicity being passed
Mm-hmm.
down, right? The first big dump by the mother is going into the firstborn. And then also the fact that the firstborn also carries a lot of the stress, responsibility, you know, the parents doing it for the first time. There's a lot more just high strung parenting that goes into a
Mm-hmm.
firstborn, right? So I continually see that a firstborn child is the one that is struggling the most with their health. So that's my hypothesis as to what's going on with me.
That viewers, what do you think about that? If anybody has a short story to tell, that would be extremely helpful.
Actually, just one more fun little anecdote to back that up is I'm also a music teacher and a voice teacher. And I specifically find that older children have the harder time accessing certain sounds that we need for singing that are very annoying. Like, for example, you want to be able to isolate your nose to get a certain nasal resonance. And repeatedly, older children have a harder time accessing these like weird parts of their voice. So yeah, just a little personal pattern that I've been witnessing is that I think us older children bear the brunt of a lot. And it comes out in our physiology, in our musicality, in our self-confidence.
I see. Now, first and foremost, that's actually you've created two very interesting hypotheses. Maybe in another time we might explore that. Although it is just an exploration, this is not definitive or anything of that nature.
Yep.
Um,
There's no double-blind study
yep.
happening.
Um, so before anybody comes after me. Now, I was going to maybe ask this, and maybe you have some insight, maybe you don't have some insight, because I did mention earlier about you through a very early age suffer through a lot of infections, chronic infections and stuff like that. And I also mentioned about, the thymus and lymph nodes shrinking, especially with low NAK ratios. And if you want to know more about this, viewers, you can go through some of the work of Hans Sandley, where it talks about, I think it's called, is it Stress Without the Stress or The Stress of Life? One of those two books, right? And I was just thinking, because your parents sort of like smoked, they drink, they do a whole lot of different things. They could be some of those like tough cookies kind of people, right? Do you think that might have an effect, or could you suppose that could have an effect on, like, you know um bearing children, and you suffering from a number of low immune response and low energy related complications?
I mean, I'm guessing so, not to blame them because they didn't know. No one knew about any of this stuff, that this is how it all gets passed down. But I know that I'm coming down the line of at least 3 generations of cigarette smoking women. Yeah, not even just the men, but the women. Like, my mom, my gran, I believe her mom smoked as well, and they all grew up in this factory town. So, you know, I don't I don't know what else to, you know, to look at in terms of, the fact that I have such high cadmium, for example, like why, So again, I don't want it to come across like I'm blaming them, because I know no one did anything intentionally, but it certainly seems to be that our generation, I'm a millennial, and everyone coming after me is suffering with a lot of chronic issues that we didn't necessarily incur ourselves, because it's not just me. I see a lot of people younger than me who, I've seen a lot of children's HTMAs as well, and the amount of metals that they're carrying, how else is it possible that these have gotten into them if it wasn't transferred down to them, right?
And I hear you. The whole talk about the children congenital issues. This is an important part of maybe today's topic, or maybe what I'm trying to come at here is this: because now you know that you've had three generations of your parents from both sides working in factory towns, more or less, because that's at like Southeast United States and Canada. That side has been notoriously known for being a industrial town
Mhm.
in many ways. And I'm not trying to say that, or maybe what I'm trying to raise here is this. What I'm trying to raise here is this. Because now you've had about three generations of this, right? Do you ever think that in your lifetime, right, that you'll be able to reverse, you know, three generations of extremely bad habits and patterns that play out in the body? Or do you think that what do you think what about that?
Doomed. I'm doomed. Okay, well, let's put it this way. I'm
Uh-huh.
43, and I had a very strong intuition when I was 15 that I wouldn't have kids. Yeah, I remember, because when you're 15, that's when all those things start kicking in, and I just foresaw. I was like, I'm not having my own kids. If I have my own kids, or if I have kids, they'll be adopted. And my husband calls me a cycle breaker, in terms of many things in my lineage. And I just really think that, even though I'm healthy enough to get by, if I were to have a kid, and obviously I know I can at 43, but I wouldn't at this point. But if I were to have had kids, let's say in my 30s, that would have been so taxing on my body. And I suspect that, there's some women who say that, well, here's an interesting thing. Actually, here's an interesting thing. My mom says that when she gave birth to me, all of her digestive issues cleared up. Okay, I'm not joking. So, did the hormones shift to the point that her digestive issues cleared up? Or did she just dump a bunch of copper into me? I don't know. But it never felt right to aim to have kids for me. It never felt like the right focus. So, yeah, will I reverse it in this lifetime? To be honest, I'm not even that focused on it anymore. It's weird being 43, right? It's weird because you're still this is how I describe it. It's like you're still the same person as, sure, you evolve, you're wiser, all that stuff. You've learned a lot of lessons, blah blah blah. But you're still basically blah blah blah. You're still basically the same person. You're just still alive. Like, you're just not dying, right? That's all. You're the same person, you're just not dead
Mm-hmm.
yet. So, I don't necessarily think that I will reverse everything in this life, but that's not my
Mm-hmm.
goal. My my goal is to bring awareness. The biggest thing to me is that I believe that we're living extremely out of balance with the
Mm-hmm.
planet. To me, that's the number one
Mm-hmm.
problem. The number one problem is that we are not in sync with Mother Earth, Father Sky, God, whatever you want to call it. The planet knows how life needs to function. And, you know, for whatever reason, that could be a whole other one. For whatever reason, humans with our superior intelligence have been able to play God and engineer our lifestyle to such an extent that we are so far beyond domesticated that we're able to manipulate things on such a high level that we don't even know what it means to live in harmony with the planet, right? So if there's anything that I'm passionate about, it's just kind of pointing that out, that we are the product, we're the byproduct. Our, my generation and going forward, we're the byproduct of, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. And where does this lead? It leads to a lot of chronic dysfunction in our physiology, because this isn't the way we are supposed to be eating, sleeping, existing. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the receptacles we put our food into, this plastic and that weirdness. And so, yeah, I'm more just kind of trying to live in a way that is as symbiotic with nature and animals as possible, and bring, like, my mission is to bring
Okay.
awareness to that,
So
and hope that we can turn the tides
I
and
hear you.
realize
So
where we
I
are.
think right now you're probably at a stage where you need to wake up. I like to call them the normies, right? And obviously there's still maybe some unanswered questions about whether you'll be able to reverse 3 generations of bad habits and horrendous patterns, heavy metal toxicity in your lifetime.
Just living comfortably for me is enough, though. Just living physically
I
comfortably.
I I understand.
Like, having been
It's
so uncomfortable, right? Having felt so uncomfortable in my body at times, like, so with what it feels like to feel good. Let's put it that way.
then let me
Just to feel even how I feel now is fantastic.
mhm. Let me just throw this question at you, and maybe this might challenge you a little bit. I am going to introduce at least a friendly challenge. Don't oh because you did say that as long as you can, try and get comfortable under your own skin and you can get to raise the awareness, like that's great enough, that's good enough for you. Don't you maybe suppose that you could be, you could be, how do I say, led, to more things, maybe in regards to your own health long term? And what do you think about that? Because the thing about me is that I think everybody could always, at least in for their own health, aim to, to build such a robust system of where, they'll be able to thrive no matter what age, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there to see if this picks a few buttons.
Yes. Everything I do is aimed at me achieving my maximum health possible. I go to bed at the same time every day. I wake up at the same time every day. I live in a very clean, conscious way. And don't get me wrong, I am feeling so much better today than I was a year ago. Like, since being able to tolerate my mineral balancing program again, things are vastly different in what I'm able to tolerate, my confidence with my digestive system functioning properly on a day-to-day basis. I don't have such anxiety that things are kind of just going to go haywire and weird. So I think that, health is, oh my gosh, I'm going to say the cheesy thing, health is wealth. We need our health, and you don't value it until it's compromised. You don't value it until you lose it. So I'm always aiming to have the best health that I possibly can. I guess I just mean that my ultimate goal isn't to be like 100% clean of
Hmm.
everything as the goal. My goal is to be as functionally healthy as I possibly
Hmm.
can and feel the best that I possibly can. But this might sound this might sound pessimistic and like old person-y, but being on this journey for so long, it's like I think about it differently now. Like I am on the other side I've gone over the hill of middle age. I'm approaching the older side
Hmm.
now. I'm not a young person anymore. So I don't think about it the same way as like I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. It's more like accepting of the fact that I was born with a certain path. I was born with a certain set of challenges, and I used to fight against that a lot
Hmm.
more. And now it's like I've kind of accepted that this is just the hand I've been given. And accepting that and working with it actually allows me to feel more at peace
Hmm.
with it and make music, be in bands, do the things that I enjoy with, within the limits of what I know I can do to stay
Okay.
healthy, you know? And that's fine because there's that whole resistance thing when you're just constantly resisting something, it just makes you have more anguish about
Hmm.
it. So to a certain extent, I've accepted it, but that doesn't mean I don't have my Limcomin and my Megapan and my Renamide and my calcium and my steamed vegetables and my grass-fed organic meat. That's what I'm doing every day. To an extent, I just hand it over to the grace of God. What God has put for me, that's what it is.
Yes. Viewers, that is an important message that in regards to your own health struggles, especially if they tend to go into the genetic realm in nature, that you just gotta have to do your best and leave the rest to God, forces of the universe, and what have you. But obviously, don't slouch and don't slack off. Right. Anyway, now
What did they say? You do what you can, and then you detach from
come
the outcome,
exactement.
right?
Now, this will probably be. I have two final questions. Two final questions as we wrap up. Now, you are in a better place, and I know that, and pretty happy with that. Two things. Would you say that maybe finding more, how do I say this, love and acceptance now that you're with a partner? Big up to Kyle. Would you say that that has helped you in many ways tolerate, your program or even certain foods that may have been problematic beforehand? And in addition to that, would you still entertain after 4 years of mineral balancing and years before that? Would you ever entertain genetic testing again?
Hmm, that's a good question. So definitely. So I did get divorced a couple years ago, and part of the reason for my divorce was you'll never hear me say anything bad about my ex-husband because he's a fantastic human who I trust in many ways. And, for example, he even still has my banking password. Like, he's a good person, very integrous. And it's just one of those things where, as I went through my health journey, I began to see things very
Mhm.
differently. I began to see the whole world, both the physical world and the invisible world, very differently. And that just really led us to become different people. I would say that, us getting married, we were both at a time when we were ready to grow up. We had played in bands and been friends for years, and we were just kind of ready to step into adulting. And even though we took that step together at the same time, I then, I guess, veered into, very deeply into the alternative health world. and having gone through what I went through, and also my spiritual life developed far beyond what it was when we started as a couple. For anyone that does mineral balancing, like let's say anyone who reads certain literature about mineral balancing will see that there's also a spiritual component to going through these changes. We see that there's an emotional side to so many of the patterns, right? Seeing all these patterns on hair tests. I remember the first time when Lewis saw my hair test, my first one was with him when I stepped into this kind of mineral balancing. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I can see what's going on with you, the way, you are because of your hair patterns." I was like, "What do you mean?" But now I get it. Like, you can see these spiritual and emotional patterns, and chicken or the egg doesn't really matter, but it's reflected in your physiology, what's going on emotionally, or vice versa. Getting divorced was awful, obviously, because you don't marry someone expecting to not have them be your life partner. But it was necessary because we just weren't thinking the same way at all anymore about too many things, to the point that we were not a cohesive team anymore. And I ended up meeting my current partner through a spiritual online community, completely unexpected and completely random and not premeditated or intentional at all. And he actually has been doing hair tests for the last year and a half with me, and he takes his endopan, kelp, megapan, and paramin every morning, and has learned a lot about it through me, and I've grown a lot spiritually through him. And it's just made that whole part of myself feel, again, like more cohesive. It's like we're on the same page. We look at things the same way. We have the same, he introduced me to Druidism, which is like a very natural way of looking at the life, looking at the world and living. And I just realized that just jived completely with how I already think and feel and live. It's just that now is just something I don't even have to think about. He tells all his family and all his coworkers about hair tests and how everyone should get a hair test, and they'll feel so much better if they just get a hair test. Yeah, I know we got to get the word out there. We've had very few people bite the bait, but he talks about it all the time. So I definitely noticed, just on the whole, that there's not that, I'm going to use a word, I don't even know if I should use this word, a schism, like break in my sense. I remember talking to my ex-husband and just feeling so frustrated because it felt like who I was becoming was just so rejected and so looked down upon. And again, I completely value how he thinks and appreciate the way his brain works. So there's no judgment there, but it's absolutely, let's put it this way, my NAK has come up to the highest it's ever been in the 6 years that I've been doing mineral balancing on my last test. That's the highest it's ever been, even before when I was doing Limcomin and Megapan and back in 2021. So something's clearly shifting.
What has that?
And then will I do genetic testing again? No. I've done it once. I don't see what the point is to do it again. I don't see what the point is. If anything changes, I don't think it matters anymore. Like, when you have the information from your hair test, truly, when you focus on getting those first 4 macros in balance, when you focus on getting your patterns lined up, things really start to shift. So
Yeah.
If there are infections that are getting in the way of the VDR receptor, for example, as we peel away, as my NAK increases and I'm able to fight off infections, then the VDR will no longer be affected. So it just seems, it was like an interesting little tool to learn some things, but now it's just a little interesting bit of knowledge as to why something is the way it is, but there's nothing else I can do with that information that I'm already doing.
What's that? just before I get to the next question, guys, if you hear, as to just summarize what you just said, that it is like when you're in a healthier relationship where there are certain common values that both man and woman share, like this can really help, shift your health in often very remarkable ways. Hopefully that'll be for Lauren as she grows into her relationship. And then on top of that, genetic testing, is it worth it now with the knowledge that she has? No. So, like, if you have questions for the both of us, then we can maybe share that in much greater detail. Now, that NAK ratio, where's it gone up to? Where's it gone up to?
Well, I'm definitely due for a retest, but last time it was, are you ready?
Wow. Okay,
1.75.
so that is still on the low end, but that's for to be able to go past, an NAK ratio even greater than 1 and going past certain like trauma points, right, which the NAK ratio can be related to. That is huge, man. That is
It's the highest it's been. The highest it was before was, I believe, 1.4. And then let's put it this way, in the last couple of years, so in 2022, it dropped to 0.4. Mm-hmm. That's right. Look at me being a boss with an NAK of 0.4.
that is so that you've come a long way, most definitely. I definitely agree with that. Given that we've been friends, talking to each other for a long time, or at least a good couple of years now. So we've come a very long way. Now the final question is maybe the final question. This is a general final question for everybody who, are struggling with their health in some way. So, like, yeah, for those who may have chronic, severe conditions, maybe they're in difficult patches in their lives, what message do you have for them? And what message do you have for them in regards to using genetics to see if they could find more answers about their health? What's your message for them?
I mean, I don't regret getting the genetic test done. This isn't about saying that it's like, completely just throw it out the window, because it was interesting to understand why. Or it was interesting to get that little extra perspective on, now I see how like the VDR fits with H. pylori, fits with a low NAK and a zinc deficiency, right? It's kind of interesting to see how that all lines up. But for example, if I had stopped at the genetic testing, because I did take that test to several other genetic experts and get absolutely nowhere, trying to treat me for MTHFR, for example, well, that's just it. It got me absolutely nowhere. So the reason why, I've gone on to become a practitioner for mineral balancing myself, and why it's the, number one methodology that I use for myself all the time. Even when I wasn't tolerating supplements, I was doing everything I could with food, and I was still skin brushing, red light. I do coffee packs on top of my liver, sleep, all that good stuff, breathing exercises, meditation, yoga. Oh gosh, brain, come back. There's nothing else that has addressed. Got it. There's nothing else that has addressed my health the way mineral balancing has. So, I feel the same way about any other test, be it an oat test, right? Organic acids, be it the GI map. They all provided insight to help me connect the dots, but treating things on any of those in isolation has never got me anywhere at all. The only thing that has made me feel like I'm actually shifting my health is mineral balancing. So I guess my message would be, if you have limited funds, do a hair test. Do a hair test and focus on those patterns, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference. If you're going through a hard time in your life on a, spiritual, personal level, that can actually be reflected in your hair test. It can, go up I don't know if I should share this, but me and another one of our friends actually were joking that having a low NAK, a bowl pattern, and being in slow oxidation could be called the you need to leave your husband pattern. So yeah, we've seen it. I'm a testament to that one. So um it just basically it's going to give you the most insight into what's going on and the best place to focus your money, efforts, and attention.
Yeah. So she said it, not me. Where can people find you? Where can people find you and interact with you if they want to interact with you?
Sure. Well, I have a mineral balancing site that is luminantedge.square.site. And Yvonne can put up my name below. So if anyone, wants to reach out, I'm pretty into just talking about mineral balancing and health in general. So, my primary job is I'm a musician, I'm a music teacher, I'm a songwriter. That's what that's my bread and butter. That's what I was gifted the most with. Whereas mineral balancing, I like to say I'm a musician who got sick. So I help people. I do hair tests for people, my family, my friends. I have a lot of people working through me. So anyone that resonates with my story is absolutely welcome to do a hair test through me. But, you're also just welcome to reach out and talk about it, because as I said before, my mission with it is just to share and just to bring awareness to it. So,
All right.
yeah, just feel free to reach
All
out.
right. So, Lauren, I would love to thank you for, taking time out of your day to do this and having a bit of fun while we're doing it. And viewers, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and smash that like button. Like, smash it.
Let me just say, actually, if you don't mind, just before we go, I'm going to just plug you for a second here, because the reason why I'm here is because I believe in this man so much, and his talent and passion and knowledge for this subject matter is so deep that it has just impressed me since the moment we met online. And, I highly recommend him as a practitioner. If you have anything complicated going on, he has a gift to be able to look at a chart and understand and synthesize what is going on. And his understanding of the science, biochemical science, is so deep and impressive that, you can't go wrong.
All right. Thank you all, and chat to you soon.